Hello, I'm Robin Vincent, and welcome to the best computer music bits of NAMM 2016. The weather outside is frightful, and so we're back here in my kitchen again, which is nice. While the east coast of America was smothered in 2 foot of snow, anyone in music technology had already flown out to Anaheim, California, for the annual NAMM Music Trade Show. Nobody really knows what NAMM means, but it's something to do with musical instruments and technology and pro audio and all that kind of thing. And every year, people gather at the Anaheim Convention Center to display and show their new stuff and exciting gadgets and gizmos for music production, music making, and musical instrumentation. That basically means that the show is 93% guitars, but in there somewhere is a good chunk of computer music technology, and that's what we're going to look at. Now, I didn't actually go to NAMM again. I haven't been for a few years now, which is no bad thing because it's a nightmare, that show. So I haven't actually sort of touched any of these things or played with them really, so I'm just going on the press and the videos and all the same information that you have. But I don't know, I'm here to express an opinion, and an opinion I will express. Pickings were actually fairly slim this year. So it's really interesting to look back on the video I made last year just to see how much of a difference a year can make. But as I predicted in a little piece I wrote for Computer Music before Christmas, this year is going to be all about expression. It's really good to see that the industry's sort of love affair with the iPad seems to have waned a bit, and no one really cares about it anymore, and we're now back to talking about proper software running on proper computers. So without further ado, let's have a look. The most dazzling stuff, of course, was all the modular synthesis. It was everywhere. You could patch everything into everything else. Every knob seemed to be patched into another thing over here, and this was going. This was going. You know the thing. That was just gorgeous and lovely, and so hands-on and touchable and tactile, and everybody was doing it. It was flipping awesome. But sadly, none of this has anything to do with computer music really. Although I would say that it's now much easier to integrate that with your computer. Intriguing. So what was interesting was the range of expressive, intriguing, overly featured and multiply connected controllers. So first up was this little controller from the Roland Boutique, the same place that's given us those mini sort of Jupiters, JXs and Juno synths last year. It's made in the same form factor and comes with the same optional keyboard, so it's not really about the keyboard. The thing with this box is that out the back you can connect it to pretty much anything. It's got USB for your computer, it's got MIDI in and out for regular MIDI gear, it's also got Bluetooth MIDI for an iPad or some other compatible device, and then it has CV gate out as well to connect you to analog gear, making it sort of a bridge between your computer world and the analog world. But that's not all, it's also got a synth inside and a step sequencer. It can even run on batteries and has a little speaker. So you could, for instance, run it with your laptop or a Surface while connected to an iPad, while going out to a Korg Volca of some kind, or of course an enormous rack of modular synths, and you'd be making awesome sounds. All together with this little Roland thing as kind of the hub through which everything communicates. That sort of thing is usually quite complex to achieve, but this little thing makes it really easy. The optional keyboard, I don't really think is that optional, to be honest, but priced at around 384 quid with the keyboard, it does stick itself in the price bracket of a lot of other sort of mini and small analog synths. And it'll be interesting to see the capabilities of the internal synth to see whether it really warrants that sort of price tag. For only 50 quid more, you can get the new Korg Minilog, which is an awesome looking synth. But of course it doesn't have all of the connectivity features. So yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, it's really pricey, but it's really sort of fully featured. Very interesting indeed, Roland, thank you. Meanwhile, over at Arturia, all the eyes were on the extraordinary Matrix Brute. It looks to be like the most mammoth synth ever made, which I think is kind of what they're marketing it as. But while everyone was looking at that, there was this other little thing that cropped up that nobody really noticed, called the KeyStep. Now it looks completely rubbish. I mean, what were they thinking? It looks like one of those Roland PC keyboards from like 1998. But underneath, it's a mightily interesting controller. Like the Roland, it has USB MIDI, MIDI in and out, and CV gate. You're starting to notice a bit of a theme here. But more than that, it's also got sync in and out as well, meaning that it could take its timing from something like a little Korg Volca. It too has a step sequencer inside, hence the name, I imagine, but this one has 64 steps over 8 notes polyphony, or it can be used as an arpeggiator. It lacks the synth of the Roland, but it does have a more fully formed sequencer, and the sync options make it really very interesting. So it's all starting to get a little bit awesome. The Roland definitely looks the cooler of the two, but in either case the features are phenomenal in a little sort of mini controller, and it's the sort of thing that makes me start thinking about moving outside the box, out of the PC, and about the possibilities of incorporating and integrating interesting analog noises, which ultimately means that I'm never going to have any money. In other controllers, multi-dimensional polyphony expression was starting to gain a bit of momentum. Last year, Rowley released the Seaboard Grand range of strange grey spongy controllers. They allow you to generate all sorts of interesting data for controlling sounds and performance. At NAMM this year, they released a 4-octave version, which is probably, I imagine, the sweet spot for this sort of thing. In a nutshell, what the RISE 49 and MPE can offer is sort of data creation in 5 dimensions. Normally, you'd strike a note and you'd send note information, velocity, and maybe some aftertouch. With MPE, striking the note is just the beginning, because then you can push it forward and backwards in order to change the velocity. You can sort of tilt it side to side, or even slide it side to side to alter the pitch. You can push into it to give it pressure, which you can map to another parameter. And then you've also got the speed of your release, which can be mapped to something else. And all of this is per note, polyphonic. So you put all your fingers down and can move them all differently, or vibrato this one, or this one, or these two, or move it all down, or some of them down, some of them up, some of them this way, that way, push in, push out, push out. It's polyphonic, it all happens at once. I mean, on a traditional keyboard, when you've got a pitch bend wheel and a modulation wheel, you play some notes, you push the pitch wheel, and all the notes change together. That's what pitch bending does. So the awesome thing about MPE is that it's absolutely individual per note. So it's more like playing, a stringed instrument, cello, violin, that kind of thing, where you can bend notes individually while playing the others. That's the sort of experience you get when playing an MPE controller. Software support is really thin on the ground. At the moment, the only DAW that really supports it is Bitwig Studio. And you can see a demo of me using MPE on Bitwig in another one of my videos. Rowley have their own software synth called the Equator, which ships with all their keyboards, which gives you full access to all of that expressive playing. It's really quite exciting, and I love seeing something that breaks out of the MIDI keyboard paradigm. And very few things do that successfully, but MPE really looks like it might stay around long enough to become a bit more of a standard. Although I imagine it's going to be a bit like back in the 80s when we all discovered pitch bend, and then music was just covered in all of these crazy synth solos all over the place. The same sort of thing's going to happen again. Everything's going to go wobbly and going to move. It's going to move. So we can all look forward to that. Now, Rowley weren't the only people showing an MPE controller. Keith McMillen got in there as well with what they're calling the K-Board. Now, it has absolutely none of the style of the Seaboard controllers, but it has all the functionality. I mean, all their stuff is weird to look at, so it came as no surprise that it's very odd looking with their white spongy material over the whole thing. But without a doubt, their smart fabric is absolutely ideal for this sort of controller. And they say they wanted to make it look a bit more like a regular keyboard so that musicians didn't have to make quite such a leap, which is fair enough. It plays in very much the same way as the Seaboard one does. I mean, it looks like they're notes which are going to go down, but they're not. The whole thing is fixed and flat. The black key's slightly raised. So I imagine it's quite an odd playing experience, well, as it is with the Seaboard as well. But once you adapt to a new way of playing and a new feel, then I think this sort of thing is going to get really interesting. The K-Board should be available in a couple of months, although I wouldn't hold your breath because the K-Mix, which was my favourite thing from last year's NAMM, was supposed to be out in a couple of months, and it's still not quite released. Mr. McMillen, sort it out. Okay, one more controller thing. Something called VIP, new version 2. This got me a little bit confused, but just bear with me. This seems to be an awesome piece of software that takes your entire VST instrument library and catalogues it and pulls it together and allows you to select individual instruments from your MIDI keyboard. It then throws all the various parameters over all the knobs and sliders. And this new version also allows you to build in effects, and you can sort of create a combi of up to 8 different sounds, patches or instruments from any of your various VST instruments which are there, pack it full of effects and save it as like a single patch, which is then easily recallable on your keyboard. It sounds flipping awesome, but what I can't seem to get out of them is whether it's a standalone piece of software that will work with anything, or is it only available with VIP enabled keyboards, of which there are 3 as far as I know. The MAudio Control 49, the Alesis VX49 and the Akai Advanced. These controllers are new, and they have this full colour screen in the middle which also shows all the parameters that you're controlling. So it looks like with these specific keyboards, VIP is a very integrated, very interesting and an awesome piece of performance software. It would be great if it was available on its own. I'm just not sure that it is, but I can't seem to find out either. But they are all very colourful. In the world of DAWs, there was bugger all going on. Literally nothing. A couple of little sort of maintenance updates and incremental updates, that's the word I'm after. Except for one place, which was Tracktion. Now Tracktion sort of reinvented itself over Christmas and now call themselves Tracktion Corporation. And their software is no longer called Tracktion, it's now called T, as in the current version being T6. And that's all fine and groovy. So at the show they were demonstrating T7, which apparently is a completely new rewrite of their DAW software, which focuses on being a single window thing, a bit like how Studio One and Sonar have taken that on in recent times. I haven't spent a great deal of time with Tracktion, or rather T anything, very much myself, but I do mean to, because it does look like a really good piece of software, and it purely just comes down to me finding the time. But they also released what they're calling an organic software synth called Biotech, which sounded and looks really, really interesting. I mean, they've got some proper, like, famous people into the development team and designing sounds for it. They've got artists involved in designing the GUI for it, and it really does have quite a unique sound when listening to demos online. So yeah, definitely check that one out. And then, unexpectedly, they came in and plonked a bit of hardware down. Bizarrely called the Copper Reference. This is supposed to be a really high-grade audio interface, stereo in and out, with 2 whopping grade tubes in the top that just sort of glow at you warmingly. The idea being that this introduces a good amount of warm character to the sound, which is a really interesting idea and certainly makes them stand out from the crowd. No idea exactly on the specs or pricing, but it's certainly something to look out for. And honestly, that's it as far as DAWs are concerned. Pro Tools talked about some cloud thing they keep banging on about. Sonar had a new drum kit, I think. Cubase, was Steinberg even there? I don't really know. Digital Performer was demoing their new version, but that's been out for a little while, so I don't know, struggling to get anything exciting out of there. Oh, apparently N-Track has a new version. Does anyone remember N-Track? So scrapping around for other things to find, then we find ourselves reintroduced to MAudio. Now MAudio were owned by Avid for a while, and then they sort of parted company a couple of years ago, and there's not really been anything out since that split. They're now part of the same group that does Alesis and Akai, and this year they had a bunch of new stuff to bring to the table. Along with the Control 49 that I've already mentioned, they released a piano and a piano module, which is a very rare thing these days. They also updated the MIDI Sport. The MIDI Sport? But what interests me is their range of M-Track audio interfaces. They are all in the desktop form factor, which I really like, with a big knob in the center and access to all the knobs sitting on a unit on your desktop, rather than those flipping fiddly little knobs you get on rack units. God damn, I hate that. So desktop units, which is awesome, and they've got a range from a stereo in and out up to 12 in, 12 out. They all look great, and the 8x4 looks particularly interesting, although to be honest, it doesn't really offer anything more than my Steinberg UR28M, which is now getting to be a few years old. They do connect via USB-C, which is interesting, but I have no idea what sort of performance or latency that gives until I can actually get my hands on one. The other thing worth a mention is iConnect. I've seen them on the internet, I've seen them about, but never really got my hands on one, and it seems like a really interesting idea, to the point that I can't believe that all interfaces don't do this. The iConnect sort of unique feature, if you like, is their ability to connect to more than one computer at once. So it has two USB sockets on the back. You can connect it to a PC and to a Mac, or to two PCs, or to a Mac and to an iPad, or a PC and an iPad, or an iPad to an iPad, I suppose. And then it has a clever little application that allows you to route audio from one to the other. MIDI as well, so if you were thinking of adding another computer to your setup, then something like an iConnect audio interface would be ideal for that, because you're not having to mess around with network connections, or MIDI over LAN, or audio over LAN, or all that kind of nonsense. You just route everything through the one interface, so both computers are connected to the one box. Stick your mic in the front, you choose where it wants to go. It's quite clever. And they had a new one of those out, which was essentially the same as the ones they had before, but with different ins and outs. Again, that was pretty much it on the audio interface front. I mean, Presonus had a new version of their 192 Studio, but I don't know if anybody cares. Because it's just another rack box with a few ins and outs, you know. We've got those. Yeah. Because I'm still looking for the ideal audio interface. The K-Mix from Keith McMillen that we saw last year still has not arrived, and it is supposed to be released any time now, but still only with OS X drivers, no PC drivers, which is really annoying, because that's the closest thing I've seen to what it is that I need. So what is it that I need? What is it that I'm after? Well, as I said, I'm tempted to be using more and more external analog gear, and I do have. I mean, I've got my base station 2, and I've got a few other bits and pieces, and I can see that that's going to grow. And so I want an audio interface that I can integrate with those, so that the outputs of those can route through this audio interface, so I can choose whether I want to record them as audio onto the computer or not. At the same time, I want to be able to sort of mix a little bit the level of the signals coming in. For which you could say, well, I need a bleeding mixer, don't I? Yeah, but that takes up so much desk space. This huge thing with these huge channel strips of all these knobs and bits and pieces. I don't really need that. I need something that's small, but yet has a little bit of controller functionality. I also want to be able to use it when the computer's off, so I don't want it to all be based on some kind of software mixer that I've got a mouse around on. I want it to be instantly accessible. Same as you can do it with one of those multi-input sort of rack units like the Presonus 192, but again you're onto fiddly knobs and software control, and I just want the desktop form factor. I love the desktop form factor. It just needs to be of a reasonable size with a few faders, a few knobs. I mean, maybe we could even start sticking patch cables in that can patch it into modular gear, so maybe I could use a little DSP on this, patch it into my analog bits and pieces. Wouldn't that be interesting? That would be interesting. Sync in and out, CV gate in and out, MIDI in and out, that kind of functionality. Something like the K-Mix was as close as I've got to that, but I still can't get my hands on one. So a bit like combining that Roland A-01 controller with an audio interface to give you this central hub of control of all your gear. Not a mixer. Let's get out of the mixer paradigm. Let's move forward. Let's have something which bridges that gap between the analog world and the computer world, like the Roland controller does, but that perhaps integrated into a desktop unit with some faders and lots of inputs in the back. Don't need outputs. Who needs outputs? I just want it to go to my speakers, so I just need inputs that I can monitor through the box and go bing, and it's recorded straight into the computer. Easy. Come on, someone get on with it. So yeah, that's it really. I mean, you know, those expressive controllers and Tracktion was really the only interesting things. The other things I'm just sort of dragging up because I'm trying to find something to talk about. Didn't see too much crazy stuff. I mean, Aerodrums was there again. They were there last year, and they're here again this year, fresh from turning down a Dragon's Den deal, which is quite interesting. But the cool thing that they had is that they got it set up with virtual reality, so you can wear the virtual reality mask, helmet thing, whatever we're going to call it. What do we call that? I don't know. And in that, you can see the virtual drum kit that you're virtually playing. I mean, that's just genius, absolute genius. In fact, it's the perfect application for the Microsoft HoloLens. Perfect. So then you don't have to be in a virtual world. You can just see the drum kit as a hologram and have your normal room all the way around you. Fabulous. Also, Spitfire Audio had a huge release. Loads and loads of press and announcements. Can't wait to see it's going to happen. It's going to be released any second now. Here we go. Along with BT. We've been working with BT, not British Telecom, which is what you always think of when you hear the name of top producer BT. It's like calling yourself the BBC, isn't it? Anyway, so this BT guy, I've been working with Spitfire Audio, and they've produced this amazing synth thing called Phobos. Phobos could be. But they absolutely failed to tell anybody about it. So as far as I know, the only people who've actually seen this thing are the handful of people who turned up to their big launch at NAMM. Because unfortunately they clashed with something that Avid were doing at the same time, so I'm not sure that anybody turned up. Certainly nobody tweeted about it, nobody wrote about it on the internet, and Spitfire Audio haven't given out any information. So all you've got is this video on their website telling you how wonderful BT is, with no actual information about the software synth at all. Which is a shame because, you know, the hype and the pedigree of Spitfire Audio are immense. They're awesome. Makers, purveyors of superb boutique software synthesis and sample libraries. So I was very excited to see what they might do, but no, I have no idea. The Microsoft Surface wasn't particularly evident either this year. There was one on the Bitwig stand because that's just flipping awesome. In fact, there's a video that Sonic State did of Bitwig Studio running on the Surface, and it's really interesting because you can hear Mike from Sonic State talking to Klaus from Bitwig. I mean, Klaus looks like he's on day 4 and it looks mightily hungover, but that aside, it was really interesting to hear Mike talk to him because he seemed to start to realise how flipping awesome the Surface and Bitwig are. It was like you can hear the sort of amazement in his voice when he's going, hang on, this is really, really interesting, really, really cool. So yeah, I'll stick a link to that in the description. Go and check it out because it is a really interesting little video. So next year, Microsoft, book me a stand, fly me over, and I'll do a whole load of demos of music production software and cool stuff running on the Surface. You've got to do it. People need to know that the Surface is an awesome platform for music making and creation and performance and coolness. So that's it for now. That's my best computer music bits from NAMM 2016. Maybe there's something I missed out. Maybe there's something I didn't even see. If so, tell me about it. Come and tell me about it. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with 2 fit guys with really tight tops playing around with the Touche expression controller. Until next time, go make some tunes.